All right, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at a truly ancient mystery. It's a story that involves a dying king, a letter sent in desperation, and what might be a miraculous, one-of-a-kind image of Jesus Christ. You know, the Gospels are pretty clear that Jesus never actually wrote anything down himself. But what if that's not the full picture? What if there's a twist? Because a really careful historian back in the 4th century claimed he found something in an old archive, something that could change everything we thought we knew. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're going way back to around 30 AD, to the kingdom of Edessa. It's in what we now call Turkey. And the king, a guy named Abgar V, has it all: power, wealth, everything except his health. He's dying from this horrible disease, maybe leprosy, maybe gout, and none of his doctors can do a thing about it. So as he's suffering, word starts to trickle in from travelers about this incredible healer over in Nazareth, a man who can supposedly cure people with just a word. Abgar figures, this is it, this is my last shot. So he dictates this absolutely desperate letter. And it's not just, hey, can you heal me? He actually offers Jesus political asylum, a safe haven from the people who were trying to kill him. Just think about that for a second. A pagan king offering the King of Kings a place on an earthly throne. But wait a minute, how do we even know any of this happened? Is this just some story that popped up centuries later? Well, no. The answer actually comes from a major player in early church history. All right, let's get into the evidence. The whole story comes to us from a man named Bishop Eusebius of Caesarea. And for a historian, this is like hitting the jackpot. We're talking about someone who was obsessed with primary sources. In the 4th century, he gets access to the official state archives in Edessa. And he claims that right there, he found the original documents written in Syriac that lay out this whole incredible exchange. And Eusebius couldn't believe his eyes. It wasn't just Abgar's letter. He says he found a reply dictated by Jesus himself. In it, Jesus blesses Abgar for believing without seeing him, but he has to turn down the offer. He explains that he has to see his mission through. He has to face the cross. But he makes a promise. After he ascends, he'll send one of his disciples to heal the king. Okay, let's be clear about something from a historian's point of view. It's super important to understand where this story fits. The church does not consider this to be canonical scripture, on the same level as the Gospels. And that's mostly because it shows up pretty late in the historical record, and there are, frankly, some questions about where it came from. It's what we call an apocryphal tradition. A really powerful story for sure, and one that tells us a lot about the faith of those very first Christians. But you know what? The story doesn't stop with a letter. Not even close. Because according to tradition, when the king's messenger came back, he wasn't just holding a message. He was holding something else, an object of incredible power. So here's the thing. King Abgar had this backup plan. His messenger was actually a painter named Ananias, and he had secret orders. If Jesus says no, at least bring me back a portrait of him. But when Ananias tried to paint him, the story goes that Jesus' face was shining with this divine light, and the artist was just blinded by it. He literally couldn't paint what he was seeing. So Jesus sees this guy struggling, and he does something amazing. He asks for some water, washes his face, and then dries it on this linen cloth, what they called a mandalion. And in that instant, his face was miraculously imprinted right onto the fabric. This is what's known as an oikiopoeton. That's a fancy Greek word that means not made by human hands. And get this, the moment King Abgar sees this image, he's healed. Instantly. But the story takes a turn. A few decades later, a new king takes over who isn't a Christian, so the local bishop has to hide this sacred relic inside the city walls. And it just gets forgotten for 500 years. It's not until a Persian siege in 544 AD that it's found again, and legend says the oil lamp left with it was somehow, miraculously, still burning. Okay, now this is where things get really interesting for us as historians, because there's a huge logical puzzle here that's bugged researchers for years. The story says the image was made when Jesus was alive, right? He just wiped his face. So why do all the ancient copies we have of this mandalion and all the descriptions of it show a man who looks like he's been crucified? You can see traces of blood, wounds. It doesn't quite add up. Well, a British historian named Ian Wilson came up with a pretty mind-blowing theory that just might connect all the dots. He suggested that, okay, after the resurrection, the apostle Jude Thaddeus did go to Edessa to fulfill that promise. But
He wasn't carrying a little face towel. He was carrying the ultimate proof of the resurrection, the entire burial shroud.
But hang on, there's a huge cultural problem with that, right? You can't just walk up to a pagan king and unroll a 4-meter-long bloody burial cloth from an executed man. That would have been seen as unclean, a total offense. It would have been horrifying. So they needed a delicate solution.
And this is where the theory gets really solid. It all hinges on this one very specific, kind of weird Greek phrase that was used to describe the Mandalion, tetradiplonlon. Now, that's not a word you hear every day. It literally translates to folded in 4 doubles, or to put it simply, folded into 8 layers.
And this is the genius of it. Check this out. If you take the Shroud of Turin and you fold it exactly like that, tetradiplopilon in 8 layers, something amazing happens. All the wounds on the body, the hands, the feet, they're all hidden away in the folds. The only thing left visible is that serene, powerful face.
So the conclusion of this whole theory is pretty stunning. The legendary Mandalorian of Edessa, the cloth that healed King Abgar, was actually the Shroud of Turin, just folded up very carefully so it looked like a simple portrait. It wasn't until centuries later, when Crusaders got to Constantinople, that it was finally unfolded, revealing the image of the entire body for the first time. So where does this leave us? What's the big takeaway? Well, the whole story of King Abgar lives in this really fascinating gray area, right? It's somewhere between documented history, we have Eusebius's account to study, and this powerful sacred tradition. Whether it's 100% literal fact or a story created to express a deeper truth, there's no denying it's a narrative that has had a huge impact on people's faith for almost 2,000 years.
In the end, this whole legend of King Abgar makes you wonder, doesn't it? It forces you to ask a really deep question. Are the most powerful messages in the world written with simple ink? Or are they written with sacrifice, leaving a mark not on a piece of paper, but on a piece of cloth, and maybe on the human heart itself?